When Dune by Frank Herbert came out in 1965, it was considered the first planetary ecology novel on a grand scale, as it introduced a complex and believable ecosystem of an imagined planet named Arrakis. Looking back at the novel today, it is considered one of the earliest examples of environmentally conscious works of science fiction. 60 years later, this dimension becomes even more relevant and continues to partially shape the film adaptations that have been recently made of the story. Dune especially stands out for its emphasis on an ecosystem that we don't often see represented in science fiction cinema, which is the desert. Today, we'll look at the ways in which filmmaking tools are employed by Denis Villneuve to represent this fascinating ecosystem in his 2021 adaptation of Dune. From the very first shot of Dune Part 1, we get the impression that Arrakis, the desert planet, is at the heart of the film. Before we even get any actual shots of it, we hear the voice of Chani introducing the planet and emphasizing its beauty.
My planet Arrakis is so beautiful when the sun is low.
Her description is coupled with images of the sand dunes presented with this ethereal effect thanks to natural sunlight. The film also uses a warm, orange-tinted color palette to convey the intense heat and dryness of the desert planet. When it comes to lighting, it appears that the director and the cinematographer chose to use natural light whenever possible for the exterior shots to convey the intensity of the heat of the desert. For that purpose, many of the desert scenes were filmed in real desert locations, mainly Wadi Rum in southern Jordan and Liwa Oasis, also known as the Empty Quarter in Abu Dhabi in the UAE. This gives a lot of authenticity to the visuals and helps create a tangible sense of the arid environment of Arrakis. What is also incorporated to paint a strong image of the harsh weather of the planet is this wavy, rippling effect, creating a heat haze that makes objects appear to shimmer or wobble. While the very first scene does emphasize the importance of the desert to the film, we still don't get to explore it right away. The next scenes take place in Caladan up until the 30-minute mark, where we get a second, much more epic introduction of the planet. This time, we're not presented to Arrakis through Chani. Instead, we experience it through the point of view of Paul. That makes perfect sense since he's the protagonist of the film. So an optimal experience with the environment of Arrakis would be through identifying with his character. That is the reason why we have scenes with him interacting with this environment both visually through his exposure to light, but also through sensory means as he gently touches the sand dunes. Those interactions were highlighted even further through the presentation of images that contrast those of the desert. Before Paul moves to Arrakis, we see shots of him closely interacting with the environment of his own planet by touching the grass and looking at the landscapes. These shots speak to his emotional connections to this environment and serve as moments of farewell before he moves to a drastically different environment. The images of the desert that are painted later are much more intense thanks to this contrast between the green landscapes of Caladan that are abundant with water, and the drylands of Arrakis that are marked mostly by this scarcity of water. This contrast is also communicated through lighting, as Paul's final moments in Caladan are depicted in much dimmer light, specifically at sunset, while his landing on Arrakis is marked by strong and bright light that he is specifically exposed to before anyone else in the ship. From then onwards, we get to explore Arrakis mostly from the perspective of Paul. This first interaction with the planet is considered one of the biggest challenges of adapting the original book, which is a depiction of the long monologues that take the readers into Paul's head as he first explores Arrakis. To convey these crucial moments, the filmmakers had to look for different creative means that, of course, are not simply voiceover. So we find such instances of exposition in the dialogues. One example of that is Paul's interaction with one of the Fremen about the palm trees.
Should we remove them? Save the water?
No. These are sacred.
This moment served both to highlight the scarcity of water in the planet, but also to point to the strong connection of every organism in its ecosystem, including the palm trees. Another method of presenting the world of Arrakis was through the voice of this guide explaining the particularities of the planet in Paul's dictionary. This moment is utilized to introduce us to the different plants that exist within Arrakis, which are all inspired by real-life plants that grow in the desert, like saguaro, burrobush, and sand verbena, which are found in different places across North America, as well as incest bush, which is native native to South Africa. There's also the shepherd's tree, which is claimed to have the deepest documented roots on Arrakis. That is actually based in reality, since the shepherd's tree is a protected species of South African tree known for having the deepest root structure, except that the movie exaggerates the depth to almost double the original one, which is 223 feet. When it comes to animal life, this very scene also seems to hint at the marine life that might have existed before on Arrakis through the sculptural artwork of what looks like fish. According to Dune lore, the planet was once covered by oceans on 91% of its surface before a catastrophic event led to its desertification. So these images might serve as a nod to that long gone past of Arrakis. The other sign of animal life that we get to see is that of Muad'Dib, a mouse desert that is claimed to be native to the planet of Arrakis. This animal shows up briefly during the final third of the movie, moments before Paul and Lady Jessica go out into the desert. The physical look of this desert mouse matches its description as a kangaroo mouse with large eyes suited for nocturnal vision. The animal looks identical to jerboas, which are hopping desert rodents found in North Africa and Asia. In the context of Arrakis, the desert mouse is known for its remarkable resilience and ability to thrive in the extreme conditions of the desert. The way that is demonstrated in the movie is through the close-up shots on its ears, showing the way it produces the water that it needs to survive. Those qualities are subtly presented as an inspiration and a guidance to the people living on Arrakis, meaning the Fremen, but also to Paul Atreides, as we will learn later, which explains why it appears right at this crucial moment where Paul is about to confront the desert without any protection. Muad'Dib is a symbol for all the skills and qualities that Paul needs to survive in the desert, as the Fremen consider it as wise in the ways of the desert. Even its name appears to come from the Arabic word mu'addib, which means the instructor or educator, as in the one who teaches manners. Now, the last and most important sign of life that was shown in the movie is, of course, the sandworms. If you've watched Dune Part 1, you're probably already aware of the significance of those creatures in the movie, as they're present at nearly every climactic scene in the story. This importance, however, is emphasized even before those intense scenes, as the film builds anticipation around them through discussions about them. So we hear about their significance before we even get to see them.
The largest and most dangerous organism on Arrakis is the sandworm.
The guide Paul listens to is utilized once again to tell us about the sandworms and their characteristics. And again, we have scenes where Paul looks at those sculptural artworks that show their large size and horrific physical appearance. We only get a real look into the sandworms 1 hour into the movie, and even then, anticipation is built through the dialogue between the Imperial ecologists and Paul. What is interesting in that conversation is how the desert environment is deeply associated with the sandworms. That's why we spend a good amount of time getting those aerial views of the vast landscapes of the desert. The first sign of a worm we get is what looks like a sandstorm. Notice how, at this stage, we don't even see an actual worm. So in a way, it looks like it's the desert itself that is moving and reacting to the presence of the harvesters. This builds the way for the strong connection that this creature has to the entire ecosystem of Arrakis, including its people. Now, when we do see the sandstorm directly, several techniques are employed to highlight its significance. One is the long shots that we get of the characters with the sandworm behind them. In such shots, these men look so tiny, demonstrating the terrifying size of the sandworm. Close-up shots, on the other hand, are used to show the hands of the characters sinking in the sand as a result of the vibration that the sandworm causes. At the same time, we already get introduced to the carriole moments before the sandworm appears, but at the time, it happened to look so massive and horrific in its own right. So having an even larger entity such as the sandworm to swallow it helps in drawing an even more terrifying image of those colossal creatures. A final touch that adds to the epic nature of this scene is the prayer that the Imperial ecologist makes at the site of the horror that takes place.
Bless the Maker and his water. Bless the coming and going of him. May his passage cleanse the world.
This speaks to the significance that the sandworms have in the planet of Arrakis and in the eyes of its people. After all, the Fremen refer to it as Shai Hulud, which comes from the Arabic phrase Shay Hulud, meaning a thing of eternity. This detail speaks to both the spiritual power of those colossal creatures, but also to their deep significance and connection to the ecology of the desert. While the actions we see seem to be coming solely from the sandworms, they are still meant to represent the will of of the entire desert. When Dr. Kynes comments on the terrifying event that took place, she makes sure to explain that the desert isn't kind to equipment, that the desert isn't kind to humans, not the Sandworms.